Hi everyone, this is Koinzell here. So today we have the Yunjin reality versus my math guides for Yoimiya. If you have seen Yoimiya's or rather Yunjin's performance so far, you know that there is some discrepancy. I'll talk about it in this video, and it's actually the reason why I want to do this video first. Let me just quickly go through what we're going to run through in this video. So why this video first? Assumption on Yoimiya's elemental skill multiplier effect. The updated figures based on Yoimiya's elemental skill multiplier not working on Yunjin's trigger quota. The damage showcase figures versus the math, the comparison, and then we'll have the I'll just briefly talk about Yunjin builds and whether it's worth using Yunjin over Bennett for Yoimiya. Okay. So first off, thank you everyone for participating in the poll. I can see that there's an overwhelming interest in Yaemiko. But it has always been my intention to do this video as the first Yunjin video to address the assumption made in my Yunjin Yoimiya math guide, which has proven to be incorrect, that particular assumption, now that we have had the chance to test Yunjin. I addressed this on my Twitch stream on day 1 of 2.4 as well, when we try out Yunjin. So I wanted to provide the updated math versus reality for Yunjin Yoimiya before we do the next video, which will be Yaemiko Math Guide 1. I'm looking forward to do that as well. I'm so glad that she's not a buffer. It just makes my math a lot easier. Okay, so the assumption on Yoimiya's elemental skill multiplier effect in my Yunjin Yoimiya math guide, Yunjin math guide 2, we assume that Yoimiya's elemental skill multiplier would work on Yunjin's defense buff, which we now know is not the case, unfortunately. So what this means is that Yunjin's buff will be lower than the figures in my Yunjin math guide 2, and I'll show the updated figures here before we look at the actual performance in-game. So before that, right, let me just quickly explain why I made that assumption, that the elemental skill multiplier work on Yunjin's defense buff. So first off, I was aware that C4 Xingqiu's multiplier did not work with Cinnabar's Fingers effect, which is worded very similarly to Yunjin's buff. But that was our first and only case, so I was a bit hesitant to apply the same. Now that we know Yoimiya's multiplier doesn't work, the damage formula is very clear to me, where separate multipliers sit in the formula, where they should be in the whole bunch of nested brackets, and this issue wouldn't recur. Because not to mention, these are the only two with separate multipliers in the game right now. C4 Xingqiu's effect and Yoimiya's elemental skill multiplier. So now that we know this issue will not recur, and they are really the only two multipliers, the only two with the separate multipliers in the game, which is very rare. Okay. Now, typically for my math guides thus far, I will either highlight both situations if there are two possible situations and explain which is taken in the math guide itself, which is usually the lower figures, or I simply include both, like the original Yoimiya math guides where calculations were done for both cases, whether or not Yoimiya's elemental skill multiplier is separate or not, because back then before her release we don't know whether it's separate or not, right? And usually I take the lower figures, but in this case, like I said, because C4 Xingqiu's multiplier was the first and only case, so I was a bit hesitant to apply the lower figures. And more importantly, NGL, I was feeling very rushed for Shenhe and Yunjin because they are buffers, and I had to do up individual character math just to include their buffs. So I dropped that, and it came back to bite me in the behind. I dropped doing the replicating the math figures with the assumption that it doesn't work on her buff. So now it has came back to bite me in the behind. And honestly, this is the risk of doing pre-release math, since there are more unknown / unconfirmed factors. But this is also the first time I have to update my math post-release, thankfully, and hopefully it's the last, or at least we maintain such an occurrence rate where it's just once out of the many math guides I've done so far. Fingers crossed. Okay, so my sincere apologies that the original math was working under the wrong assumption, and now you know why the assumption ended up being wrong, why I didn't do two permutations. Let's move forward and look at the updated figures. The lesson learned from me personally will be to always try to do the two possible situations in future, or at least always take the lower figures regardless of whether or not there was only one precedent case. So there's that. So let's move on. Let's look at the updated figures. So I'll quickly go look at a version where the figures have been updated based on Yoimiya's elemental skill multiplier not working on Yunjin's trigger quota, and they look as such. So I'm not going to go through every single portion, obviously, but if you see here, if you have seen my Noelle math guide, you know what these red highlights and pink cells refer to, and I have explained this here as well. Figures highlighted in red implies that the corresponding Yunjin buff is weaker than fully built Bennett's for Yoimiya. So you see here, C0 Yunjin at 33%, and R1 and R5 deathmatch at 34%. And this is against Bennett's 39%, so it's lower, that's why it's red. The pink cells are the ones where it's even lower than the sub DPS, it's even lower than the F2P Bennett, and these are the Yunjin sub DPS builds, which if I've mentioned several times, I don't recommend it at all. So for a C0R1 Yoimiya, sub DPS Yunjin requires C3 to be better than fully built Bennett's, C2 or C0R5 DM for F2P Bennett. For full defense build Yunjin, you will require C2 or C0R5 deathmatch to be better than fully built Bennett's buff. And full defense build Yunjin is always better than F2P Bennett. Okay? So, what does this mean to the overall buff figures? So for a C0R1 Yoimiya, okay, it's about, instead of 67 to 111%, it's 42 to 75%. Compare that to the F2P Bennett, which is 27 to 31%, and fully built Bennett, which is 39 to 44%. So Yunjin is still buffing more, but there are now cases where she buffs slightly lesser than Bennett, a fully built Bennett, and that will be C0 Yunjin versus a C5 Bennett. Also, as you go from C0R1 Yoimiya to C3R5, Yunjin's buff percentage goes lower because her buff skill only on Yoimiya's damage bonuses and CRCD, not her talents. Okay. However, even if Yunjin's buff percentage is lower, you'll definitely still do more damage. This part, no change. Okay, you know what? I'm not going to read every single portion. Let's touch only on the changes, which is the red highlights. Yeah. Okay. I will cover the full defense versus the DPS in the TLDR section. So likewise, once we have Kazuha included, the buff percentages go lower. And basically, sub DPS Yunjin now is worse off, where you need C3R5 instead of just C3R1 to be better than fully built Bennett. But in return, it is always better than F2P Bennett for C0R1 Yoimiya anyway, not the rest of constellations. Actually, once the C0R1 Yoimiya is good enough, then the rest is okay, doing better. But for a full defense build Yunjin, you need C2 or C0R5 DM. This portion is pretty much the same. Now let's talk about the buff percentages. So for C0R1 Yoimiya, Yunjin's buff provides about, initially it was 55 to 90% if Yoimiya's elemental skill multiplier would work on Yunjin's defense buff. If it doesn't, then it's 35 to 62%, which is still more than Bennett. Okay? Depending on your Yoimiya talent levels and Yunjin constellations as well. F2P Bennett is about 22 to 25%, fully built Bennett is 31 to 36%. Bear in mind that this 36% should be compared to the 35%, which is here. This is the two that we are talking about, 35 to 62% and 31 to 36. So obviously, as you go to C3R5, Bennett gives you diminishing returns, likewise for Yunjin's buff. Okay. So C0R1 Yoimiya is 1% lower than a fully built Bennett for a full E duration where you are attacking non-stop. The full 10 seconds of Yoimiya's E or elemental skill where you are attacking non-stop. So once you go all the way to C6 Yunjin, you get a 62% boost. So still higher than Bennett. Okay. Now, once we include the fourth and final party members, either C6 Toma with Yunjin or Zhongli with Bennett, the buff percentage for Yunjin drops even further, down to 42% versus Bennett's 32%, which is over here. So this is Yunjin C0R1, sorry, Yunjin R1, I shouldn't say C0, it's actually C6 for this figure, and 31 and 42%. Okay, so the 48% drops to 42% once you include the C6 Toma and Zhongli resistance shred, which is mainly because resistance shred is a lot stronger than the C6 Toma effect. But we can't afford to use Zhongli in the comp, because if you use Yoimiya's charge attacks to apply Pyro, you're gonna have to do it twice, once for C4 Yunjin, second time for Kazuha. It takes too long. I mean, if you don't have C4 Yunjin, it's still not so bad. You need to do one charge attack, but it's still 2 seconds of a setup time just for a Pyro application. It's still not that great. Doable, but not that great. But once you have C4 Yunjin or above, C4 plus, I really don't recommend going for like Yunjin, Zhongli, Yoimiya, and Kazuha. I don't recommend that. Okay. Now, let's look at 4 elements buff versus 3 element buff. So previously it was 48 to 82%, now it's 30 to 57%, and 55 to 90 down drops to 35 to 62%. So if you look at the difference, it's only about 5%. And the 5% is the 3 elements being 5% better than the 4 elements. Okay. Now, this is the max damage potential. So we are looking at 1.34 to 1.36 million damage here for Yoimiya, up from say 1.24 million with a fully built Bennett plus only resistance shred. So once you include the resistance shred, you'll see that the damage buff from Bennett gets better, and C6 Toma doesn't get as much of an increment. This is almost 100k increment. This is only about 50k. When we go from when we include a C6 Toma versus a Zhongli resistance shred. But nevertheless, it's still a nice boost over what Bennett can provide. It's about 8.5% increase, this versus this. And it's also not the highest number achievable for a comp with Yoimiya Yunjin, but like I said, it's a very comfortable comp. Okay? So let's go to the TLDR quickly. I've already covered this, I'm not going to cover this. I just quickly cover this portion here, which is the full defense buff build versus a sub defense build. Even with the changes, full defense build is still better, 4 to 5% better, and 5 to 6% once you include Kazuha. Okay, so this is the updated figures that I wanted to share. I'm sorry it went on a little longer than we have wanted to, but it's just so that you guys have a clear mind how it looks like. Now let's look at the interesting stuff. Let's look at the showcase itself. Okay, so this is the showcase. We'll start with Bennett first. So this is Kazuha, Bennett, Yoimiya, Zhongli. A very standard comp before Yunjin was introduced, yeah? Apply shield, or rather get your shield. Burst, E, Kazuha, Q, and E. Because I have C2 Kazuha. Then Yoimiya attacks. Okay, you know what? Let me slow down the portion here. Okay, let's do it at a slower playback speed so you guys can see the damage that is coming out. Ooh, we are hitting a 118k here. Very nice. Or if you want to round 119k. So this is my Yoimiya damage with Bennett. The stats for Yoimiya is exactly the same. Bennett is exactly the same. Kazuha is exactly the same as my math. Okay, all covered in my math guides. Now let's look at Yunjin. Okay. Next up we have Kazuha, Yunjin, Yoimiya, and Toma. So if you follow my math guide previously, you understand why I chose to use Toma. In fact, I just talked about it earlier. You don't want to be using charge attack to apply a pyro. At least not if you have both C4 Yunjin and it's only with a single pyro. Okay. You can use burst, but without a second pyro character, it's actually very hard to get enough energy back for your Shimenawa effect. Because I am using Shimenawa effect, so that's why I can't use the burst here when I'm not in a team with double pyro. Although technically speaking, I can use it here, but it's fine. I'll show you guys without using her burst how we can do it. Okay, just increase the speed for the setup. Toma elemental skill, Yunjin EQ. Okay, Toma Q, do a normal attack to refresh your shield. That was Kazuha, usual setup QE, and then Yoimiya with her attacks. Now, unfortunately, we did get hit by Cryo, so our attack speed is slow here. It was slowed down here. But let me just repeat this portion. The reason why I chose this showcase of the many that I've done is because it also showcases Thomas' shield. Okay, it's still effective. We're still able to take the Primordial Vicious breath attack. Okay, so still doable Thomas' shield. And don't worry about the damage figures. I will do a overall comparison after this. Okay. Alright, the only food that I'm taking here is just crit rate food. Okay, just plus 20% CR so that it makes my life easier when I'm doing showcases. In fact, I can tell you guys, Bennett gave me a harder time than Yunjin and Thoma, and I'll address that later in the TLDR session. So let's go look at the figures now. Alright, let's look at the figures. Okay, hang on. Okay, yeah, this is the issue with add cells hotkey. Alright, now we have the comparison here. This is the first round of M5C. M5, sorry, why do I keep saying? Why do I say C? M5. So you saw just now Bennett had a 118.7k. Okay, so the M1 and N4 figures are doubled together. Divide them into half, and that's the actual figure that you see in game. So earlier Bennett was 32010. For Yunjin, it's also lower, it's half of this. But it is higher than a fully built Bennett because M1 has a lower attack multiplier, so Yunjin buffs more. Then as we go to N2, which is a higher multiplier, Yunjin becomes lower than fully built Bennett. Okay, but when we go for a low multiplier again, Yunjin again does higher. So basically that's how the trend works. And you'll see that it's only 0.55% better. C4 plus Yunjin is only 0.55% better than a fully built Bennett. Why is that the case? Because, bear in mind, this is only the first M5 combo. In our math, it's the full duration, which will result in more of the low attack multiplier hits, M1 and M4. Okay? M1, M4. You see, these are the cases where Yunjin does more damage than Bennett. And if you do more, you will have a lot more damage difference. And the main reason why, compared to other characters, whether you do one combo or the full duration, this has a difference because Yunjin's buff is, in a sense, flat. It doesn't scale with your talent multipliers. That's the reason why. And also, our math initially, when I went through the updated figures, it did not include the Zhongli Resistance Shred or Toma. Only the max damage potential portion was the one where I included the Zhongli Resistance Shred and C6 Toma. Also, the other thing is C6 Yunjin's benefit is not realized here as well, since it's only the first M5 combo. Only a few full duration can show you the difference in more hits when it comes to a attack speed buff. If you compare just the first 5 hits, you're not going to see a real difference. The difference only appears when it comes to the full 10 seconds of Yoimiya's E. And also, my Yoimiya is also C3 R5 Thundering Pulse. If C0 R1, Yunjin buff percentage will also be better than this compared to Bennett's, as shared in all the previous math cards and also just shared in the updated figures. So let's look at the complete math. Let me do a math where I give you the actual stats and factors, and I even factor in the gradual stacking. The gradual stacking of her passive, the one where you get 10 stats from attacking. Okay. So the math is here, the figure showcase is here. These are the actual figures that you saw from the video earlier, from the showcase earlier. So these are the figures, 0.55%, right? When it comes to the math, the difference is 0.45% between Yunjin and a fully built Bennett. And you'll notice that the difference between them is not big. This 0.11% is the variance between a fully built Bennett math versus a figure showcase. Only 0.11% difference. And for a C4 plus Yunjin, it's only 0.01% difference. This is talking about this. The difference between this and this is 0.01%. The difference between this and this is 0.11%. So reality being 0.55 or math being 0.45% for just the first M5 combo, I'll say it's pretty close. As you can see, variance is also really small. Some as small as 4 in terms of the actual damage figure. Example, between this and this, 74913 and 74917. And of course, you have the largest being about 200 plus. Between this and this is about 233 difference. But it's a 233 difference versus 5 to 6 digit figures actually. So this is a typo here. It should be 5 to 6 digit figures. So this is really as accurate as I can get with the math. The variance is due to the rounding, since there are a lot of multiplication and division involved. So the more multiplication and division involved, the bigger rounding errors will get. This basic math, yeah. Okay, so just a quick reminder, a full duration of Yoimiya's E will show the increased gap between Bennett and Yunjin, especially with C6 Yunjin providing additional hits, eventually reaching approximately 8.5% better than Bennett. Okay, so this 8.5%, if you recall, was this that I talked about. Okay, this is what I'm talking about. The difference is 8.5%. Also, bear in mind that deathmatch effect is not present here versus a Primo Jovichek. Because deathmatch effect require, although it works off you, it requires you to have at least 2 enemies nearby if you want the defense buff. For Primo Jovichek, it's 1v1 scenario, so we didn't get any defense buff from deathmatch as well. So in a sense, you can say that the showcase that I'm doing now is kind of skewed towards Bennett, because C6 Yunjin doesn't get to showcase her ability. Jovichek also dies really fast, so we can't showcase the full duration. And please don't ask me to retry with a different weapon. I have enough of doing test runs with Yoimiya and Yunjin for some time now. Okay, enough. But the main thing is because I also feel that the message should be clear enough now. The showcase should be good enough to show, along with the math and the actual comparison. Okay, so if you look only at the first M5 combo, it's only a 0.45% increase for C4 plus Yunjin. Doesn't feel good, right? I mean, it's more or less the same. You can just say that the buff from fully built Bennett and C4 plus Yunjin is the same in that scenario, which is true, but not everything in the game you can clear with just the first M5, right? So eventually, as you do more with a full duration, especially with C6 Yunjin, you will eventually reach 8.5%. There should not be any doubt with regards to my math here in terms of calculation. In the first place, the calculation was never wrong. The only wrong thing was the assumption about her elemental skill separate multiplier effect, whether it works on Yunjin's defense buff. Okay. So let's quickly talk about Yunjin builds one, since the reality versus math comparison is here. Important thing is really to remember the 8.5% figure. Okay. Now this 8.5% is talking about direct damage comparison. If you want to talk about buff percentage versus buff percentage, it's still 31% versus 42% on Yunjin. 31% on fully built Bennett, 42% on Yunjin. We are talking about a scenario where Yoimiya is unbuffed. This is the amount that each of them can buff. You want to talk about the overall damage figure in terms of a Kazuha plus Yoimiya plus Bennett plus Zhongli versus Kazuha, Toma, Yunjin, and Yoimiya. The difference is the Toma and Yunjin comp having 8.5% better in terms of the overall damage figure within 10 seconds of AE. And bear in mind that my C6 effect math is on the very conservative side, where we assume that you just get additional 2 arrows. You can in fact get 4 or 5, and if that happens, the difference will be even bigger. Okay, so let's talk about C5 Yunjin builds. A full defense buffer build 4-piece hearts with about 160 ER, which is what I'm using. You get 5 base ER rolls plus her ER ascension stat. That will give you about 160. Okay, it's close to that, not exactly, but close. Or you can go full defense buffer build with a ER sense if you really want more ER. But let me put it this way, up to user preference. If you saw my showcase, right, I didn't really follow the rotation that I recommended. The rotation that I recommended will give you better energy. The showcase that I did was really just focusing on quickly comparing between Bennett and Yunjin for Yoimiya. Okay. So personally, I would recommend for full defense buffer build for normal attack based DPS, not a sub DPS build. I think we already covered that in all our math guides thus far. And by normal attack base, I mean damage mainly from normal attack. Example, Yoimiya, Noelle, etc. Characters like Ningguang or Diluc, whose damage come from multiple sources, because their charged attacks, at least in the case of Ningguang, and their alert bursts are the ones where they also deal damage. They also deal a lot of damage. They are characters that are well-rounded in that aspect, where every single attack that you can use from them contributes to their overall damage. Not like, say, Yoimiya, where you really just need her normal attacks. Okay, so you will not gain for these such characters, right? They will not gain as much damage boost from Yunjin versus Bennett's buff, because that's expected, right? Because Bennett buffs everything, because it buffs attack. But Yunjin specifically normal attacks. Okay, I hope that's clear. That should be clear. Alright, now let's talk about whether it's worth using Yunjin over Bennett for Yoimiya. So we'll talk about Bennett pros, Bennett cons, Yunjin pros, and cons as well. So Bennett pros, right, for the Bennett sims, right, don't come at me with a pitchfork if I miss any specific pro. These are what I could think of in a 10 to 15 minute time span. So you have Pyro application plus Pyro resonance. That's what Bennett can help provide when paired with Yoimiya. He also allows you to be used with Zhongli for the stronger shield in game, and as well as a 20% resistance strat for mono Pyro build, which is very nice. It's very good. It's one of my favorite comp before Yunjin came along. Bennett also gives you healing. Bennett also buffs other members as well through snapshot for off-field abilities, though the impact is not as big in a Yoimiya mono Pyro comp, because in a Yoimiya mono Pyro comp you don't really need those. You don't really deal a lot of. You don't have characters that deal a lot of off-field damage. Right, I mean, because for Kazuha, he's EM based, so the attack doesn't really help as much. It helps, but it's not as big the impact compared to someone who's a pure sub DPS like Bennett's burst. Beto's burst. That's pure DPS. Okay, and also Bokin Da Bokin. That's a pro for Bennett. I'm sorry, I can't resist. And Bennett cons. Okay, so mainly for Yoimiya, I'll say is the fact that you are limited to his AoE, his field. Because you are doing normal attacks, there's no snapshotting. You need to be in the field to be able to do the buffed normal attacks. So I actually had to retry the Bennett showcase several times because my Yoimiya kept getting pushed out of the field. It was very irritating, and I couldn't break my cycle. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a fair first M5 comparison, right? Because if you do 2 to 3 hits and then you do an M5 again, it's no longer the same as the first M5 because Yoimiya's attacks allows her to gain stats. The 10 stats that she gains, which gives her 20% pyro damage bonus in total. Okay? So this is quite a big comp for Yoimiya because I'll talk about this in the Yunjin pros. So Yunjin pro, stronger buff than Bennett. You free up Bennett for a second team in Spiral Abyss. Not restricted to any field. This is important for Yoimiya to resolve a AA targeting issue. Essentially, you just go nearer to the mob that you want to hit. Yeah, I know she's ranged. Yeah, people are not happy of the fact that you have to move close, that she auto targets the enemy that's closest to her. That's how bow auto targeting works anyway. Okay, so the best way to circumvent it is for you yourself to move nearer to the mob that you want to hit. Simple as that. So if you are restricted to a field like Bennett's field, that can be a bit frustrating to play with, because you're gonna end up, you don't want to end up hitting an enemy that you don't want to hit first, just because you are staying in Bennett's field. And I understand that this is an issue for a lot of people, and also the reason why a lot of people trash her as a DPS. I understand those difficulties, yeah. So which is why I say that Yunjin does provide you that pro, where you're not restricted to that field. So potential for one of the biggest Yunjin pro to me is the potential for huge boost once the defense percentage substat pull arm or non-conditional defense percentage weapon effect on pull arm is released. Because right now, deathmatch is very conditional. You need 2 enemies on the field. So any 1v1 situation, you don't get any defense buff. That's the bad thing about deathmatch. in terms of defense buff for Yunjin. So I know that we don't know when this will come out, but I'm pretty sure sooner or later we will get a defense percentage substat poem. Or one with a non-conditional defense percentage, yeah? I believe that it can happen. Like, all you need is a 4-star or even a 3-star weapon with defense percentage substat and it will still be better than deathmatch. Now, one last pro for Yunjin. Since her buffs are better on low multiplier hits, dodging on Yoimiya has a smaller impact on DPS loss compared to with Bennett. Because Yoimiya's attack string requires build up to entry M5, which are her high multipliers. So in other words, you want to be able to hit your entry at M5 so that you deal more damage. If you are Yoimiya main, you know what I'm talking about. If you only do 2 shots and you dodge once, you're missing out on that huge damage from entry. Okay, I shouldn't say huge, but that large damage from entry at M5. Because the way her attack combo works is like it slowly builds up to the entry at M5, and the entry at M5 are the ones that do a lot of damage. If you see those one-shot type of videos when she was released with Mel with those damage per screenshot setup, it's usually the entry at M5. Okay, so with her buff being better on the lower multiplier hits, it's not as big as a loss if you dodge. If you didn't manage to hit the entry at M5 and you dodge because of the combat situation, you aren't losing as much DPS as compared to Bennett. Because the low multiplier hits, you do deal more damage, as we can see here, right? 82k. Oh wait, let me use the showcase. 82k versus 64k. Okay. So that is the Yunjin pros. Now let's talk about the Yunjin cons. The con of Yunjin is that the strength of her buff is dependent on artifacts for good defense percentage rolls, at least for Feather and Flower, because you should be using defense Sands, Goblet, and Circlet. So compared to say someone like Bennett, where you can just go for ER and maybe some HP percentage if you want more healing, Yunjin requires you to have some really good artifacts in order for her to buff very nicely. Although you can also say that this is a pro because if you have those GG artifacts, it also means okay. I mean just to be clear, right? Although I say it's a GG artifact, it's much easier to roll to get it than say a CRCD, typical CRCD artifact, DPS artifact. Like when I was farming for Ito, I managed to get Yunjin artifact without really specifically looking for it. Okay? So her buff is only stronger than Bennett if the whole E duration is used. That's her con. Okay? That's one of the big con for her. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same, especially if it's just the first M5. I just showed it in my showcase, right? First M5, pretty much there's no difference. But if you do the whole E duration, the buff will be stronger than Bennett. So I will consider this a con for her. Although, technically speaking, this con may not really apply for F2P players if you are always using the whole E duration. Okay. Anyway, another con of Yunjin is that she requires Toma for the Pyro application, Pyro Resonance, and the shield. And Toma's shield is not as strong as Sony's without build up higher normal attacks. So the playstyle is that after getting your Toma shield up and you're ready to go while on your Yoimiya, you do need to make sure that your initial positioning, you don't end up taking too much damage so that your shield has a chance to build up. Basically, that's what it means. Okay? And you saw the showcase, Toma's shield is not that bad. Okay? My Toma has 33k HP, level 9 talents. After including a constellation, the base is level 6. And he was still able to have that shield on Yoimiya throughout the breath duration of the Primo Jovishat. So it's not that bad. The Toma shield is not that bad. My ER on Toma I can't remember, but it's also pretty high. About 160. You know what, maybe I'll just do a quick show of the stats later in game. So to conclude, right, yes, I think that Yunjin is worth pulling and building. Not just building, but building. not just pulling but building as well, in my opinion, considering the pros and cons for both Bennett and Yunjin above. In particular, her potential when an unconditional defense percentage poem is eventually released is actually very attractive to me. It straight up means that I can buff more just with a new weapon. That potential is awesome. So for our actual showcase, since we are comparing only the first M5C, the difference between Bennett and Yunjin is not significant. It's pretty much the same, the buff. But for the full duration, with more low multiplier hits, this difference will pull ahead to approximately 8.5%, including C6 Yunjin's additional hits as well, which eventually we will get there. Okay, eventually F2P players can get there. I mean, even on my F2P account that I haven't played for months, I do have some characters that are C6, some 4-star characters that are C6. So C6 Yunjin effect is not in the comparison as well, since you will need the full skill duration to see the difference. So if you have macro or turbo mode for your normal attacks, her C6 effect will be even bigger than my math, since my math assume worst case scenario. Right? So since she's a 4-star, you will eventually be able to get her to C6. And it helps that we are getting her for free 2 in this patch. Even at C0, she's typically only 1% less buff-wise for the whole E duration. I already covered this in the updated figures, right? At C0 R1, it's about 1% less than Bennett, provided you do the whole E duration. So if you can afford to build towards soft PT, it wouldn't be too bad to pull a couple of them pulls on the current banner just to see if you can get getting more Yunjin constellations. But pull at your own risk, okay? Especially if you already have guaranteed, then it's a bit more risky to do soft PTs. To build up your soft PT. When you don't have guaranteed, then it's not so bad, right? Because at most, if you lose the 50-50, then you get guaranteed for the next character that you want. Still okay. So, yep. Anyway, this is what I have for you guys in this video. Let me just quickly show my character stats in game. Okay. By the way, if you heard my baby, I'm sorry about that. He's a bit cranky today, so I want to finish this video and tend to him as well. So, this is my Yunjin stats. This is without 4-piece husk effect yet. Let us get a bit of 4-piece husk effect going. Let me show you guys Thoma first. So my Thoma is at 33k HP, not the best. I was actually sitting at 37k HP previously, but we had to change to 4-piece Nobles. So my HP stats on Nobles is lower. Okay, and my Thoma right now is sitting at 168 ER. This crit rate is not accurate because this is with the foot, crit rate foot, 20% crit rate foot, so minus 20% CR from this. So obviously CR CD is not optimized. We are really just focusing on him being a HP build. And the only reason why his CD is so high is because of Staff of Homa. I definitely don't recommend people pulling for Staff of Homa for him. If you want full HP, just go for the what is it called, that White Tesla, I think, that 3-star weapon, that has HP percentage. Otherwise, Favonius Lance is actually a very good option for him. Favonius Lance is great in this comp because he helps generate energy for the Yoimiya for burst, so that she can use her burst and use her Shiminawa elemental skill. Or it also helps to regain energy for Yunjin. So I definitely recommend using Favonius Lance. The only reason I'm using Homa is because I am a how should I put it? I'm someone who likes to ensure that my shield is as strong as possible. That's the reason why. Okay, now if you want to see the difference, right? If I go to a Favonius Lance, my HP is still 31k. We lose 2k HP. That's still pretty okay. Okay? So if you have energy issues, definitely recommend you to use Favonius Lance rather than a spear or polearm that gives you HP percentage. Unfortunately, I don't have that 3-star polearm that gives HP percentage, so I can't show you guys. Okay? But Favonius Lance is definitely a go-to F2P option for him. Okay, I call it F2P, but rather than call it F2P, let me say the go-to 4-star option for him. Okay? So that's my Thoma stats. If you are wondering how his shield was able to withstand the Primo Jovi Shep breath attack, that's that. In all the Yoimiya stats, I was trying to play around with something. That is not my actual stats. The actual stats are still as per my math guide. And next we have Yunjin. Wait, let me just wait a while. The 4-piece husk effect is kind of irritating in that aspect. Right, so this is my Yunjin defense with 4-piece husk, all 4 stats active. We have 2.89k defense. CR, remember with this with CR food, so minus away the CR food is 51.9%. So it's about 1 to 2 ratio. Energy recharge, I'm actually sitting at 172.7, so it's already a very high amount. I'm using Deathmatch. These are my artifacts. I am using a defense sense. I just happen to have ER percentage on my other artifacts. Okay. So basically I have the exact same number, 11.7% across my artifacts, 4 of them, plus the innate Ascension stat that she has that gives ER, because Yunjin gives you ER on Ascension. So you get 173 ER without using an ER sense, and with a very nice high amount of defense. So it's very doable. It does offer her the ability to be able to continue her rotation smoothly. Obviously I didn't show that in the showcase. Like I said, I was focusing on damage versus damage. Bennett versus Yunjin. Okay. So these are the stats for my Yunjin and Toma. You know what, let me just show you guys the Yoimiya math, or rather the Yoimiya stats as per my math guides. Okay, so this is my Yoimiya. Yeah, we are sitting at 3.1k attack because of Pyro Resonance and because I'm using an attack percent goblet. Again, like I said, minus away 20% CR for the food, so we have about 70 CR with 249 crit damage, 115.5 ER, and attack already covered. And you see that I don't have any pyro damage bonus here because I am using a R5 Thundering Pulse along with a Shiminawa. So if you see my math for pyro versus attack goblet, pyro is only very slightly better than my attack percent goblet. And the reason why I'm using attack percent goblet is I have an onset attack percent goblet it's okay. It's not great, but it's okay. It allows me to use offset on another piece. That's the only reason why I'm using the attack percent goblet. But also because of my math already showed that you can afford that slight drop if your attack percent goblet is better than your pyro goblet. C3, talents double crown, 10 and 13. Okay. So these are my Yoimiya stats. Should not need to show my Kazuha, right? Pretty much the same. I have not changed his stats at all. R5FS, we have 985 EM with 4-piece VV, C3, and 612.9. Base talents 9 for burst and skill. Okay, so I hope that this video is helpful to you guys in terms of how Yunjin performs versus Bennett for Yoimiya. Also the reality of her performance versus my math guides. I'm still quite apologetic that the wrong assumption was made, so we end up having a higher figure than it should be. But it's not so bad because at least now I show you guys what's the updated figures. She does still buff more, but you need certain conditions fulfilled, which is the full duration. You need the full duration so that she can buff more. If you only do at like the first few attacks, she's not gonna buff more, right? Because there are gonna be people who just compare specific damage figures and then they say, oh, she's not that great. But you have to factor in for the fact that if you do the full E, the damage difference will be there. Okay? If you only compare the first M5, you'll see that not much of a difference, right? This is only 0.45%, 0.55% better than Bennett, which is bad in a sense because Bennett heals as well, but Yunjin doesn't. But anyway, I already talked about all the pros and cons for Bennett and Yunjin. So you guys can assess based on that and see whether those pros or cons, which of them are a bigger factor for you. For me personally, it helps that Yunjin is adorable, and it also helps that she has a very big potential boost if you can manage to get a defense percentage pull in future released. Which I do believe that eventually down the road it will happen. Okay, so thanks everyone for watching. If you like the content, remember to like the video and click subscribe for more. And don't worry, I don't think we will encounter another such case where the assumption caused the math figures to deviate quite a fair bit, because this is very unique to the separate multiplier that Yoimiya has, which, like I said in the game, is only Yoimiya and C4 Xingqiu. Alright, thanks everyone, bye! Oh right, next video will be Yae Miko. Sorry, I forgot to mention. Next video will be Yae Miko Math Guide 1. Then from there, we'll see whether we continue Yunjin or we do Yae Miko Math Guides. Okay, bye!